Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar comic review. This is going to be my full spoiler review for Avatar The Last Airbender, Ashes of the Academy. This is Avatar one-shot comics number 6. It is the third and finish to this second trilogy of one-shot comics that includes Azula in the Spirit Temple, The Bounty Hunter and the Tea Brewer, and this one, of course, Ashes of the Academy. So these three books are going to be collected together in the future into a collected edition. They're going to put some sort of a name on it. I'm guessing it'll be Fire Nation something or other, because you have Azula, kind of Iroh, and May kind of covered here across all these books. Fire Nation characters with some backstory. So they're going to do something like that. So fun to see us kind of make this kind of progress and get to this point. Another thing with this book is that it's had a very sort of efficient, clean kind of production, announced only back in October, and it's out now in March. That's great to see. After especially like the Last Korra comic, how long ago it was announced, finally only releasing a few weeks ago. Like a real long kind of time between announcement and release. This one very, very smooth, which is really cool. And the big thing with this one is that I think this is, at least for me, very clearly the best one-shot comic. And when I talk about these one-shot comics, I always feel it's important to factor in the format we're dealing with here. That you can't really view this book in the same way as you view a full comic trilogy or even a part of a comic trilogy, because it's a one-shot. It's a one and done book. It's 72 pages. They can't change that page count. That's just the format that we're doing. We are focused for the most part on one particular character, maybe with a side focus on another or something like that. And this one, I think, makes probably the best use out of this format overall, where it feels like it's a notable story that people care about because it involves Zuko, May, Ki. It involves flashback to their time, to May's time at the Academy with Azula. So there is a bit of Azula in here, and sort of Azula, to a certain degree, even though she's not in the present day story, has a certain presence over the top of this whole story because of kind of what she represents to the approach of the Academy, which I'll get into a little bit later on. So the Azula kind of connection here also works and helps to make this a very, very notable story. But it's a real success as a book because it does do a lot. It has to be very important May individual character focus, which it executes, I think, flawlessly. While also still having some Zuko scenes, while still giving Ki some focus in terms of her first days at the Academy, while also delving into the backstory of the Academy to sort of compare and contrast what the Academy was in the past when May was there to where it is now and what we're trying to do. You have to introduce two headmistresses, one from the past, one in the present, and do that as well, along with a bunch of other kind of little things, like giving Ursa a little bit of a scene at the start, and that sort of idea. Like, it actually hits a lot of beats, but it doesn't go into the category maybe like the Mako comic from a few weeks ago of, this is such a big story, it just is far bigger than 72 pages, that it feels like it's missing everything. I actually think this one is like, sure, I'd happily read a part 2 of this. I would happily read this turned into a trilogy, because I think there's enough ideas and content here where, with a little bit more fleshing out, you could absolutely do a full series about the ideas presented here. But I think it's a pretty feature complete one shot where, like, sure, we always want to see some follow up to some of these ideas. There's some ideas that could use a bit more, but unlike the Mako comic, where it felt like a lot of scenes need a bit more time to breathe, there's a bit of backstory that's left unspoken, this one's like, no, you hit the beats that you have to for the story, and that's really strong. Like, it was major praise to Faith Erin Hicks for writing such, I think, a clean and tight 72-page story for this one. Really, really nice. Peter Warman's art, as usual, is really, really good. And seeing him kind of, do some of the characters he maybe hasn't done as much, like May and stuff like that, is cool to see. Yeah, like I think it's his first time doing like Ki as well. That's super cool to see the return to Ki for the first time in a long time. Which is something that I do want to mention here as we get into this at the start. This comic is probably most notably, to a certain degree, a sequel to Smoke and Shadow. Smoke and Shadow, of course, ended back in like 2016. So it's been a very long time since like this group of characters have like interacted in a comic. Mainly like, say, May and Zuko, especially shippers, kind of really interested in seeing what happens with that relationship because it's still a little bit unknown. Do they get back together? Obviously the answer is no, but that's also not at all really the focus of this book. This is not aiming to be the book where we attempt to get them back together. It barely, I would say, really touches on the relationship much at all. Of course, May and Zuko interact, and you can judge where their chemistry is at this point, but very clearly they're still not in a relationship. Now, there are a few scenes that do kind of touch on it a little bit that I will kind of get into here, but just to be clear, it's not what the book's about. This is why I stress one-shot format very clearly, of it's a May one-shot, not a May and Zuko one-shot. Zuko, of the three characters on the cover, is probably the third of the three. It's May first, probably like Ki second, and then Zuko. Zuko's not in that many scenes, and that's an important thing to note. They let this be the book where May gets her chance to shine. She gets to have her development of what she's doing, what her role, her path is going to be into the future. And it's good that they do that story without over-focus on the relationship with Zuko. That you can have her have this arc on her own, but they're not doing the kind of her as an individual arc sort of at the expense of the relationship. It's just that the relationship's not being addressed right now. I do think a lot of the shipping stuff is just a matter of timing, as we'll kind of get into here. So I'll actually do, as the first proper topic of the video, the Zuko-May relationship. So, like I said, they don't get back together here, but they do have some good chemistry in a lot of the scenes that they do have. Like the scene when Zuko comes to see her at the flower shop to basically ask her to kind of take part in the mission, become a teacher at the academy, to just check that the headmistress is actually following the new kind of curriculum at the academy and that they're not trying to keep things the way they were in the past. He chooses May for this because he trusts her to do this. That's already a huge step in the right direction in comparison to sort of part of why the breakup even happened in the first place, was maybe Zuko not trusting the people around him. Here he goes straight to May with this kind of thing here. And then there's also the other point, is that the ultimate May development by the end of the book is that she actually really likes being a teacher. She's passionate about this. She's passionate about helping the kids of the Fire Nation to go in the right direction going forward and move away from kind of what she experienced while she was at the academy. And I think to a certain degree there's a bit of a sense that I think Zuko maybe saw that this actually would be good for her. Even May's mother, Michi, kind of says as much as well when the topic comes up. So those two can see it when maybe even May herself can't quite see it. And that's a nice step in the right direction. He sort of knows that, okay, I know it might be tough for you to go back here, but it kind of has to be you. And I think this will be kind of good for you. That's a good one to know. And they just have that good chemistry because he knows he's kind of dropping a pretty big thing on her out of the blue. And it's a bit of a nuisance for her, but she does go through with it and ends up really liking it. So that's kind of good. And just as you go through as well, like there's a few little interactions like that that are like, yeah, they're on good terms now. It feels like we're past a lot of the drama that surrounded sort of the breakup. Like it's different than the Smoke and Shadow dynamic, where it still felt like the breakup had kind of almost like just happened relatively recently. But it's not enough time where they're going for the reunion just yet. Because you can see this when like there is scenes like Ki rather directly asks May that like, hey, why aren't you and my brother kind of boyfriend and girlfriend anymore? I think he really needs a girlfriend. And May's just kind of like, I'm sure he does, but it's not going to be me. And Ki's just like, why is that? I think you work really well together. and she just says, we're friends right now. And she kind of moves the topic of the conversation away from that. She doesn't want to talk about it here. It's very abrupt in the way it happens here. It's very almost tropey in the way that May handles dealing with this there. That, as in, don't want to talk about this yet. Because probably there are underlying feelings there. Like that this probably is the end game thing. It's just still in universe a little bit too close to the breakup. Because for us, IRL, with the comics and the releases, it's been a really long time. They broke up in The Promise, and The Promise is like 13 years old at this point. 12, 13 years when that breakup happened. But in universe, it's still only in or around a year since that happened, because there hasn't been that much of a time skip across all of the comics that we've had so far. And especially since Smoke and Shadow itself, where the last time these two characters interacted. And I think that's purely what this comes down to here, is that they're trying to do this relationship very kind of naturally, kind of realistically, and they don't want to just kind of yo-yo it back and forth, broken up, back together, broken up, back together. They want, I guess, whenever they do the reunion, to be a really kind of clear-cut, they're together and this is going to be the endgame ship from this point on. And they just want to commit to that. And this is clearly not the book that has the time to do that just yet. So instead, we'll acknowledge it here through Ki, thinking that like they have good chemistry together. Why aren't you in a relationship? She doesn't want to talk about it. Later on in the book, right towards the end, basically, right before the final action sequence happens, May and Ty Lee come to kind of check up on May in her role as a teacher. And there's a little bit of a kind of slight argument here, but I like that it sort of addresses to a certain degree why the breakup happened, the aspects of that going back to the source. May kind of feels like, oh, are you here to check up on me? You don't need to do that. Can you not kind of trust me in a way? But he's kind of like, no, that's not what I'm here for. Because like me and Ty Lee are kind of like both here for you. Because like we want to see that you're doing well and that things are going okay. But Zuko does acknowledge that like, yeah, you do have a point that like, I still do need to learn to be a bit better about trusting the people who are on my side to do what they kind of need to do. But in this case, we are kind of just here as friends here, like just coming to see you here. Like it doesn't need to be that like defensive of a thing. But the point that kind of Ty Lee makes, kind of getting in between the two of them, is just like, oh, that was so beautiful. Like the communication, you two resolved that little argument so nicely without needing to resort to kind of fighting or anything like that. It just kind of came to a natural conclusion here. And it's like, okay, there's something here. It's a showcase that compared to The Promise when the breakup happened, Zuko has actually gone through a lot of development as a character, as an individual. May has gone through a lot of development as an individual, especially in this book, where she went from maybe not knowing exactly what she wants to do going into the future to now she's a teacher, she's invested, she's, I guess, going to stay in here in this role. She's now found kind of what she wants to do, and again, Zuko helped her to find it. She now has this thing, and she's sort of helping Zuko's dream for a better Fire Nation in her own way here through, improving things in the kind of education system. That's a nice place to kind of keep her in place. And I do think coming out of this, it is probably literally just a matter of time. Maybe it's the next book. Maybe it happens another year into the future in the comics when they do maybe get back together. But I would not come out of this book feeling like they've confirmed it, it's never going to happen, abandon ship type things. No. This is just, they're taking a realistic approach with this relationship, and this was not the place to do it because they wanted to give May the focus. And I think that's perfectly fine. I think some shippers can be a little bit overbearing at times with their over focus on viewing everything through the lens of the ship rather than just letting the content sort of like be the content, whatever it is. And I hope that people can enjoy this book if they are May Zuko shippers without there being scenes that directly are super directly alluding to them getting back together. That there's just strong moments in this book for both characters, in that like Zuko really does get a chance to be a pretty strong leader here when it comes to, like, you know, making this changes in the academy. And even when confronted with the headmistress trying to push back against it, is just like, no, this is the way we're doing things. I've made my decision. We are doing things differently than things were under my father. And he's much more confident and assured in his approach here, without needing to be like overly aggressive with it. So that's very strong. The second point I want to address is actually like Azula in the book. Just because I think it's going to be a major topic probably coming out of the book, and because she's not, like, at least in the marketing, like overly focused on as like a big part of this. But when you look into it, there is like connections there. She is brought up in nearly every stage of the book, in the sense that the book opens with Key's first day at the academy. But a lot of the page count in the very early scene in the book is Zuko and Ursa talking about, kind of comparing how Key's first day is going to be, in a way, compared to the impact the academy had on Azula. So a lot of the early scenes is kind of Ursa reflecting on the past, and did the academy do good or bad for Azula, which is very, very interesting. Obviously, when May then takes up her role, there is a lot of reflection of her as she remembers being in this place herself. We address how she came to meet Azula for the first time at the academy and kind of join her little group, her entourage, kind of become friends with her. And it's experiencing all the kind of bad stuff, the cruel culture that is present at the academy. And ultimately, the flashback, what it does with Azula is that it's there to highlight Azula as Azula is the ultimate product of the academy. Azula is everything that the academy is in place to forge the girls into. She represents all of the traits taken to their extremes that they're looking for. So she should be the ultimate example of, like, best leader ever, best in class. This is everything we want. But the point the book makes is that, how did that work out for Azula? How did this approach work out for the Fire Nation? And the reality of it is, as the book points out, the Fire Nation, despite this focus on creating amazing leaders with stuff like the Royal Fire Academy for girls, they lost the war. And then when it came to Azula, as like this ultimate kind of leader, representing everything the Fire Nation is, when she finally got the role of Fire Lord, what did she do? She banished everyone around her and left herself kind of vulnerable, and we saw what happened in the finale. That was not strong leadership in the end. There are flaws in this system, and the Fire Nation has kind of suffered to a certain degree for it, and now needs to change. That's the way the book ultimately uses Azula. It's, why is the academy trying to create Azulas? You know, that they're also making the point as well, specifically with Azula, that the academy helped to create Azula in the first place. The book is not really trying to overly present the sympathetic view on Azula, because it's mostly from May's perspective, seeing a near fully forged Azula already in the academy and meeting up with her at that point. Through Ursa at the start of the book, I think you're more getting that idea, like Ursa kind of says, like, what was the moment I felt like I lost her, basically? Was it the moment she was discovered to be a firebender, and Ozai got his hooks into her, taking her in that direction? Or was it the moment she first entered the academy, and they amplified the traits that were there from Ozai? And was it one of those moments? Was it both of them together? It probably was both of them together. A mixture of all these nuanced points and every situation coming to a head to just create the Azula that we kind of know and what actually happened. So there is that idea that the academy, to a certain degree, also failed Azula. That, yes, she is the ultimate example of what they are trying to do, and that is an approach that ultimately doesn't really work. But in making her what she ended up being, it really shows the true issues at the academy. So I do really like that point that they do make throughout it. I think it's a very interesting exploration. I don't think the book overly takes, like, shows you a different side of Azula necessarily. This is younger Azula as we know younger Azula to be necessarily. The other content that we've had, like some of the flashback stuff in like Azula in the Spirit Temple and some of the other scenes from the show, is more of the places where you're viewing it through a slightly different lens. But in the case of what this is trying to do, I think they use Azula quite well. The big thing with her, and this gets into probably my favorite sequence in the book, is right in the middle of the book. Here is your giant compare and contrast. Two incidents. One in the past when May was at the school as a student. One in the present day when May is a teacher. An incident between students. A big dispute. And how does this dispute get resolved and come to an end? In the past, it's an Agnikai between girls at the academy. In the present day, it's about to be an Agnikai at the academy, but May steps in to stop it. And the details of both of these scenes is really good. Like, it's the writing at its peak, I think, in this book, because there's so much stuff here. And the Azula connection to this, of course, is that the Agnikai doesn't involve Azula as such. It's actually fought between these two girls, Hong and Pei Jing. But the fight happening in the first place is orchestrated by Azula. Azula seems to have an issue with the girl Hong for whatever reason. And so she basically decides to kind of plot against her, undermine her, and kind of force her into this Agnikai, where I guess from Azula's perspective, she's maybe aware the other girl is stronger than her, so Hong is likely to get hurt if they do have an Agnikai. And so yeah, she manipulates the situation. She gets Hong to basically be on her side by saying that, like, hey, your brother's about to be sent to the front lines. If you join me, basically, if you side with me in debate class, I'll put in a word with my father to make sure that that doesn't happen. Now, of course, you find out that she doesn't really do that. The brother gets sent kind of anyway. But then she engineers the conflict between the two girls by basically, I guess, telling Pei Jing to a certain degree make fun of Hong for what happened to her brother. But then, having Hong criticize Pei Jing because Pei Jing's actually from a Fire Nation colony and she's maybe a traitor. Maybe she supports the Earth Kingdom more than the Fire Nation. And so that's what causes this issue. Like, you see the two of these girls having this argument, like screaming at each other. And then May and Azula are just talking, and Azula's just constantly commenting like, oh yeah, I told her to say that. Yeah, that's actually a lie, but I just told her that would, upset her, that sort of thing. And she's just watching this fight happen in glee as Mistress Pearl comes out. And straight away, you kind of think, if this isn't a normal school, they should stop this before it becomes violent. But instead, the idea is basically, are you going to let her say that to you? Are you going to take that from her? You two know what you need to do. You both feel your kind of honor has been besmirched, basically, don't you? So we know how we handle this, don't we? Agnikai. The quote specifically is, should any fool cast doubt upon your honor, it is your responsibility as children of the Fire Nation to make that person pay for their crime. Remember, you are nothing without your honor. And May is stunned at this. Like, they're really not going to stop this? And Azula's like, no, they're not. Even though they could hurt each other. You see Shihan, a younger Shihan in the background, just watching this with like a kind of stone face. Like, this is just how the way things are done. And so, yeah, they set the two girls up, and it's like, yeah, at most they're like 8 years old. And here they are having a full-on Agnikai in the arena in the academy. They're going to go full on in on each other, with the idea being that, like, this is only going to end with a devastating blow or maybe more. Like a full on honor duel, which you can maybe to a certain degree understand between adults, but it's being facilitated at the school just in the name of forging the girls into what they view as being ideal leaders and warriors. It's a harrowing kind of concept that, like, it makes you look at the Agnikai as just a general concept in a very different way. You already have your doubts about it because of the way it was presented in Avatar, but like here it's just like, this is rough because they're even younger, and it's the people running the school allowing it and kind of wanting it to happen. So you see the two of them fight. The Agnikai begins. They firebend at each other. There's some blocks go in. Some fire daggers get kind of thrown around here. Hong initially seems like she maybe has the advantage here, but then Peijing counters, and it's a devastating final blow. It's just a full-on fire kind of straight to the chest, and there's a shoom as you cut away from the final blow as May is stunned, the other kids are stunned, and Azula just watches on like, yes, like, I engineered this. And yeah, Hong's injured on the ground. Peijing is like, has got this wild look on her face that this has like awakened something in her, and it's like, this is the moment where, you know, this takes these two girls down a different path because of this crazy situation in school that they had to encounter. And Azula watches on happy, I guess, that Hong has been injured in all of this, as May is just left kind of stunned by this whole thing. Because they also sort of present the idea with, I think, May, that it's her father that who kind of like basically tells her, like, become friends with the princess because this will help your career. And she just does it because of that. It ends up sort of helping her because she kind of wants to go under the radar, and actually the best way to go under the radar is to not have Azula's attention be on you and just kind of be there in her entourage, to the point where I didn't notice in my first few read-throughs that Ty Lee is actually in the flashback. She's never highlighted in the flashback, as in, like, she never, I think, has dialogue. She never talks to May. She never really talks to Azula. She's just part of the group following Azula. But you can see her in the background of a few of the scenes because you can see her braid. But otherwise, you kind of don't notice her because you're so used to her wearing very different clothing than the Fire Academy uniform. So you can see how kind of May gets kind of a little bit of a protected ride through the academy because she somewhat early on forms a friendship with Azula. So she's just kind of in really good for her whole time through there. That May views it as like, I survived the academy in a way, partly because I made that decision to kind of, you know, be part of Azula's group kind of type thing. But yeah, the Agnikai comes to an end. They do get get Hong medical attention, which at least is something. But then Pearl comes out and is like, what lesson did we all learn from this? She goes to Azula. And Azula says, do not trust anyone, not even your friends. They will always try to undermine you. Be better than them so you can defeat them when they turn on you. And Pearl is just like, yeah, sure, that'll do. And yes, she reiterates this basically. Yeah, remember, children, strive to be better than the person next to you. You'll never know when you'll need to take them down. Get back to your classes. And we do end with like a little bit of a look between a younger May looks back at Shihan, who kind of looks at her. And there's just a real sense where, like, you didn't do anything to stop that. You just watched on and let kind of Pearl make this happen. And there's a real sense that it's like she, now that she's in the school, is going to stop that from happening. And immediately, basically, she's teaching class, someone comes in, May, there's a fight happening, you need to check on this. And it's two kids at the academy basically about to have an Agnikai. That the same situation is effectively about to repeat itself. The difference is that May is actually there, and she gets there first and kind of jumps in to be like, hey, what's happening here? Why are you two arguing and about to fight? And so one of them basically points out, she's spreading lies about me. The other one says, I'm not. We're friends. And then she just suddenly thinks I'm plotting against her. May asks, Why do you think they're plotting against you? And this is a really big one. My mom warned me about the academy. She said every friend I made here was secretly looking for a way to destroy me, so I had to get to them first. And May is just like, this school. Like, she just cannot believe that this is still going on in this school, in this era, that the parents who I guess attended the academy are now teaching the kids that this is the way things are done here, even though they're doing things differently now. But as we see, this is the reason why Zuko had May kind of come to the academy, because Shihan walks out and is like, hey, you two, you have an issue with each other, don't you? Are you both going to stand up for yourselves, like you're basically your honor? And she's basically preparing them to fight. The foundations of the Fire Nation are built on the bedrock of honor. If someone has questioned that honor, then you must defend it. You and Chen, will you stand up for your honor or slink off like cowards? And May turns around to Shihan and is like, wait, you want them to fight? You are actually going to facilitate them fighting? And it's like you're borderline goading them into an Agnikai, that if you didn't appear, they might have a bit of a like hand-to-hand scuffle. It might get slightly violent, but you want to turn this into a full-on Agnikai honor duel. Really? And Shihan is just like, well, they have a disagreement. This is one surefire way to settle it. It's a proud Fire Nation tradition. And May's just like, there are thousands of other ways to deal with this that doesn't involve fighting an Agnikai. And you can see that like Ki and Liwa are watching this on, and it gets more heated. May really solidly stands her ground here against Shihan and really pushes this forward. Shihan's like, Agnikais have been part of the Fire Nation since its birth. It's part of our culture. It's in our blood. It's tradition. May's just like, tradition? Maybe we need to throw some of those traditions away. Like, tradition is your favorite word, it seems like. Shihan talks about how she has a sacred duty to teach these children to be strong, and she won't let down, the women who came before her. May immediately jumps on this and is just like, wait, seriously, the generations of headmistresses who came before, you didn't teach the Fire Nation kids to be strong. They traumatized them. They taught them fear. They taught them to fear their friends and be suspicious of their neighbors. All this talk of great Fire Nation leaders, you didn't make great leaders. You made Azula. Do you remember Azula? Don't you? When she was playing at Firelord, she was so paranoid she banished everyone close to her. The education the Royal Fire Academy gives these kids hurts them. I'm putting an end to it. And Ki's just like, yay, Sifu May. It's like seeing her really just take it to Shihan here. Shihan desperately tries to put up one last defense. But, the Academy, it's done so much good. But May just says, you've got to stop lying to yourself about this. Do you really think it's healthy to encourage kids to fight Agnikais? I remember the Agnikai that was fought here when I was a kid. You were a teacher. You could have stood up to Headmistress Pearl and stopped it, but you didn't. You let it happen. And again, the final kind of whimpering defense, it's tradition. And May's just like, you two, we're not doing this anymore. Go back to your classes. Fun's over. We're done here. And the situation is diffused just like that. May, acting like, a proper kind of teacher here, solves the situation without anyone needing to get hurt. And hits the point home hard enough where it's clear this is a proper armor-piercing statements from May. These have hit Shihan to her core, and it's not just this villainous character representing the old ways who just won't think about anything, head in the sand. She considers this, she thinks about it, and as we go into the next scene, she makes her mind up. She goes to visit Headmistress Pearl, who's somehow still alive at over 100, and they have a discussion back and forth. Pearl hopes the academy is still being run in the same way. Shihan expresses her doubts, and it effectively just results in her trying to kind of almost guilt trip Shihan into, no, follow course. Keep things the way they used to be. I took you in. you were the useless third daughter of a noble, minor noble house. You had no future. I gave you one, and you dared to turn on me. But this is really where Shihan realizes, like, oh, you're trying to manipulate me over this. Like, this isn't actually about the right way to teach the girls. You just want the power over me. Well, I'm the headmistress now. You have no power over me anymore. I will do things my way. And I think the way I'm going to do it is May's way. And she just leaves saying, I hope someday you will find peace. Goodbye. And now this does prompt the action kind of ending to this, which is Pearl looks over to her kind of butler servant next to her and is like, tell your Dai Li brother it's time to earn your keep. And you're like, whoa, what? Wait, what? The idea here being that these two Dai Li agents have sort of stayed behind, loyal to Azula, expecting her to at some point return as like the true Fire Lord. Pearl agrees with this idea that Azula is sort of the true Fire Lord that the Fire Nation needs going forward, because she represents everything the Academy wants. She's the perfect leader in her mind, even though we know that's wrong. So here she's working with these two Dai Li agents here to kind of prepare for Azula's return. And Pearl, kind of her idea here is that she needs to keep the Academy the way it was so that they can have a hope of kind of turning things around from the peaceful direction kind of Zuko's taking things in. So the idea here is that she's getting the Dai Li to kind of take out Shihan, so maybe she can install someone else in as a proper leader of the Academy going forward. And this sets up the final sequence, which is that, yeah, there's going to be a kind of kidnapping / assassination attempt against Shihan at the Academy, and May is going to be there, but actually, thanks to May's friends coming in to check on her, it's May, Ty Lee, and Zuko against the Dai Li agents, so it actually goes quite smoothly overall. I do really like, though, when Shihan comes back to the school, she has a conversation with May. May thinks it's going to be another argument, but Shihan is just like, you've given me a lot to think about. I think you're right. You asked me, why I didn't stop that Agnikai when you were a student here. She talks about how I saw 2 happen when I was a student and 3 when I was a teacher. And it's like, I thought that the Fire Nation, this is what we were. Violent people, violent past, violent future, that this was the way we had to do things. Seeing how kind of you turned out, seeing how passionately you spoke, basically, I think there is a different future for the daughters of the kind of Fire Nation, basically. She wants to believe in that, and so, she's going to do things kind of May's way. Follow the new rules and see how it works out. And this is ultimately the resolution to the plot here, basically, because there's still about, 10-ish pages left. And this is the conflict with the Dai Li and kind of stopping the kind of assassination attempt against Shihan, basically, or the kidnapping, whatever. But this resolves the core plot, that Zuko installed May as a teacher to check up on Shihan to make sure she was doing things right. Well, now you don't need to worry, because May has actually turned her around to the right way of doing things here. So it shows you the impact that May has had. She's not just demonstrating her own path kind of separately to everyone else. No, she's having an influence, and the idea is that May, and now with Shihan as the headmistress, the Academy looks like it has a bright future, and that likely once everyone starts to see the change for the better, it will happen. We'll see if there's some rough paths along the road, but it looks like this is the kind of correct approach, kind of, going forward. So like I say, yeah, this is the point in the book where, Zuko and Ty Lee show up. Ty Lee's appearance is fun here because, of course, she's not in Kyoshi Warrior uniform. She's took a break from chasing Azula all over the place, which is kind of like referenced at the start of Azula in the Spirit Temple, to, visit, family, and then Zuko told her that May is here, so he kind of followed Ty Lee over as well. This is where, like I said, that Zuko May scene happens, where Zuko says, I need to do a better job of trusting the people I know are on my side. Ty Lee's just like, oh, you guys, it was beautiful, resolving an argument without knives or firebending, very nice. And May kind of gives them the tour. But on the tour, this is when they encounter the Dai Li agents right as they grab Shihan. the fight happens over the next couple of pages. You know, with these combatants involved, of course the heroes are going to win. Like Tylee, Zuko, and May. The only slight negative here is May doesn't have her knives with her because she's, you know, a teacher. She didn't bring them with her. And Tylee is just like, wow, this place really has changed you. You don't bring knives everywhere anymore, which is a fun little detail. But yeah, we kind of resolved that. She does get involved in the action. She takes her shoe off and kind of throws it. She's just as good with the shoe. The beetle kind of that's been a kind of thematic part of like May's teaching. She breaks their enclosure, kind of using them as a distraction to kind of free Shihan. And yeah, they pretty much wrap things up quite quickly at that point because it is just two Dai agents. The only kind of, I suppose, struggle for the characters is that they're trying not to damage the school that much while they're fighting, and they're against earthbenders in enclosed spaces, so it's a bit dangerous. But yeah, May throws some school books and kind of gets involved in the action, but that mostly kind of resolves things in that way. The final resolutions to a lot of this stuff is some fun stuff, like Shihan takes the Headmistress Pearl portrait out of her room and just smashes it in half because she realizes that she just slightly went against her kind of mentor figure, and her mentor figure basically tried to have her hurt, killed, kidnapped. This is really cemented that she made the correct decision, kind of changing her approach. So there's that whole thing. There's a scene here where it's now May, Tylee, and Shihan get a chance to kind of talk overall. And there's kind of a final, like, little bit of a kind of conversation about this whole thing where, you know, they realize that she has kind of turned over to their side now, that like, yeah, she sent a bunch of earthbenders after you. I think you're good now, on the right side. And then, yeah, the book actually ends properly with May and Tylee having a conversation, as Tylee kind of notes that, I've never seen you like this before. You found something that you enjoy. You like being a teacher. And May kind of blushes a little bit and is like, well, it's not that big of a deal. And I like this moment here because Tylee's kind of like, I was worried about you, you know. We were together for such a long time. Then I went off with the Kyoshi Warriors. I didn't want you to feel like I'd left you behind. May says, I didn't. I was happy for you. Tylee says, I'm happy for you too. And we go back to, this was a joke earlier on as well. Tylee, you know how I feel about hugs. And Tylee says, I know, you love them. Playing up the idea that we also got with May and her mother, that actually deep down May does really care about people. It is a bit of a facade that she puts on most of the time of not caring, of course. So a nice way to end in terms of like the real, like, true, really notable friendship with May that did come out of the Academy. We kind of come back to that kind of right at the end, showing that like there was positives from this, but you know, May is in the right kind of place going forward. She really has found her kind of path for the future, which is I think just really strong that they've got to this point with the character here. Like, as in, this book on its own has done so much for the character. Like, Smoke and Shadow I really like as well, in terms of like just May getting to be a main character in that book for like a full trilogy. But they actually like take her in a really interesting direction here. And it now feels that like, okay, now let's maybe come back around and maybe address the relationship with a little bit of a time skip later on, or are we going to wait for like the movies or something like that to cover kind of what's happening here. So, yeah, that's that situation. Anything else I want to address from this? I suppose Key, I haven't really talked about too much. She is front and center on the cover, but she does mostly, I would say, drop out of the book by about the halfway point, because it's not really inherently about her. The back of the book, you know, the synopsis gives you the idea that, like, might the cruel culture of the Academy have Key go down the same path Azula went down? That's never really a risk, and you can see that straight away from the way the plot goes, that like May being the teacher there is not going to allow that to happen. And it's just not really the approach that the book actually takes. Maybe if they fully altered it, you could maybe see them going down that road where if they switch things around a little bit, you could maybe see that happening. Because what they do is, like, when Ki gets into the fight to defend Liwa at the kind of schoolyard, they're both sort of punished, but actually Liwa takes more of the blame than Ki does. And the negative point that they highlight with regards to the school's handling of this is that Liwa gets all of the punishment because she is not from a noble family. The headmistress doesn't think too highly of Ki either, because I guess in terms of like her own kind of lineage, she doesn't view that as high. But because technically she is basically a fire princess, she can't be seen to punish someone that's actually in an official high position. So there's that unfairness of mistreating people who are just citizens, and then giving lenient treatment to people who are from nobility. I think if they were trying to play with the might the Academy turn Ki into something resembling an Azula, would be Ki actually, it seems like, wins the fight to protect Liwa. That if she was taken into the office and was actually praised for how powerful she was in fighting and defeating someone, that might have been a little bit of a different angle they go in, and they try to make her overconfident, arrogant in her skills, but that's not the approach that they take. It's more that, no, Ki as a character is confident, she knows what's going on here, because Zuko is her brother, she, I suppose, has maybe learned more directly from him the approach that is taken here. She knows the actual history from him, that, yeah, the Fire Nation did attack and start the war, despite what the previous history book said. We were the aggressors and the ones at fault during the war. There's no real further nuance other than that. And she just very confidently is just like, yeah, the teachers are just going to have to get used to teaching the truth. This is the way it is. She has some nice scenes with May, because you can tell that, like, the two of them kind of like each other, and like, you know, you get stuff like, you know, her asking May about the relationship with Zuko, but then her asking May also about, what about Azula? Like, what was she like at the Academy? Why would Azula try to kidnap me? These type of things. And it gives you the idea of, like, maybe off screen, like, has she asked maybe Zuko about Azula? Has she asked her mother about Azula? And, like, how have they handled tackling that topic in terms of, like, you have a sister, but, like, she's not really around. There's some of that stuff, like, I'd like to go into a little bit more. If the book was more Ki focused, that's maybe some of the stuff I would have appreciated a bit more of. But overall, I think it is pretty solid overall. Yes, the flashback, like I said, doesn't really focus on the full how did the trio meet at the Academy, in that they more focus on how May becomes friends with Azula for the most part. And even then, I wouldn't overly say the flashback is extremely about their friendship as such, but more of the way Azula conducted herself at the Academy, and what May sort of saw, always being that, like, step behind Azula as part of her kind of group, seeing Azula in full flow basically at the Academy and what she would do in terms of facilitating these things to happen, seeing that kind of cruel aspect that she has, the joy that she takes in, you know, manipulating people into these conflicts to undermine people, and the fact that, yeah, what is the lesson from this fight is to not trust the people closest to you. What's Azula's ultimate downfall is that she doesn't really trust the people closest to her. There I suppose is a slight irony to that, in the sense that it's sort of proven right, in that, quote unquote, from Azula's perspective, she is betrayed by her friends, but it's more a reflection on, you know, can they follow her down the path that she wants to go down type angle. So, in interesting stuff. Like I said, it's another piece to the puzzle of Azula, but like I don't think it's necessarily going to hugely alter, I think, a lot of the Azula discussions. We're still waiting for, I suppose, the comic, or I don't know, cover it in the movie, showing Azula and what will actually get her to talk to Ursa, talk to her family again, because there's so many interesting dynamics present. I want to see Azula interact with Ursa, Zuko, May, Ty Lee, Ki. All of these characters, I really want to see more interacting with Azula, because that's the big open plot thread for plots for Avatar, that if they are building towards anything and they have a big open plot point to do in those movies, that's maybe it. Is that something they want to do in a comic, or do they want to do here? That's the question. I don't know. But yeah, I really, really like this book, like where, to the point where I feel like I'm almost like I haven't covered a bunch of the nuances that the book has here, even though the video's already gone super long. I'll have other coverage on the channel. Myself and Greg are going to do a podcast review where we basically go through the book page by page. So that will be coming in the coming week or so. And then also I'll do a big live stream discussion breakdown on everything, where we'll have all the time in the world to cover every aspect of this book as well. So I'm just going to kind of mostly leave it there for now, and just in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on Ashes of the Academy. Do you agree with me that it was the best one-shot so far? Do you think that there's issues with it maybe that I didn't bring up? What points from this book just really, really stood out to you overall? But yeah, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.